You got some rust? No big deal. You can fix this. Now there's many different ways you can repair this damage. We're going to show you a few different types, but in the end we're going to do it the right way, replace the panel, and you can get panels like these at 1aauto.com. Let's get into it. For this repair, we had to remove the bed to gain access to that panel. Now, not all jobs are going to require that. To remove the bed, we had some bolts that we had to take out. We had to disconnect some connectors, and then also the filler neck had to be disconnected. Then we could raise the bed up and out of the way. People just take some body filler, maybe even some newspaper or something to stuff in there, and then just body filler it up. And before I mix that, just going to put some material in there. Some people use spray foam as well, and it's never a good idea. There we go, that's gonna... Now I'll mix this up. All right. And once that's all mixed up, all one color, then you just fill it in like this. In some cases, to smooth it out a little bit, people just take a plastic bag and just slide it over. Just like that. You can smooth it out. Then you don't even have to sand it afterwards. And let it dry. Now that's all cured up, you can peel the plastic bag off. And if you wanted to, you just prime that up, spray paint it. Now that's just temporary. This will only last a year, and next year you're gonna have to do it again. We're gonna take this panel and we're gonna have to cut the old one out. Now, depending on how much rust you have, if you take a hammer, you can hammer higher up, and then you can see if it's even rusted in this area. You could actually just cut right here and then cut the panel and just patch in a smaller section. You don't necessarily have to replace this whole panel. Now, before I cut this out, we want to prep this up here to make sure that we don't cut off too much. I'm going to set this up here, and I'll just take a wax crayon and just mark this area. Now we're going to show you how to install this a couple ways. Not everyone has a welder, so we're going to start with riveting it on here if you didn't have a welder. And so we'll cut down to about there. That'll give us some area that we can rivet the panel onto. And then we're going to show you how to do it the right way and weld it in. Right here we have some seam sealer keeping the panels together. I'm just going to use a heat gun and a scraper and remove that seam sealer. Let's see where the spot welds are. So we can just compare the other panel and you can see where it runs along here. And we can see all those spot welds. We're gonna have to cut those out. If you have a spot weld drill bit, you can use those. Or if you have a sander like we're gonna show, we'll take those out real quick. We'll do that. And before we take the spot welds out, there's spot welds all over it. Underneath, on the sides, and right there. I am just going to slice this panel right here, and it's going to be a little bit easier. Now we're going to make our cut right here. If we weren't going to rivet this in first, we'd want to grind away the paint so that it's bare metal before we made the cut. For this, I'm going to be using a cutoff wheel. If you have an air-powered one, that will work as well. And I'll just start making the cuts. Pay attention to where your sparks are going. We have a welding mat over the gas tank, so we don't have to worry about that. And as far as the interior, we have some blankets down so we don't ruin any of the interior. I have to take care of the spot welds now. You can, like I said before, you can drill these out. What I'm gonna use is this little belt sander and just sand around each of the spot welds, and that's gonna be able to separate the panel from the body. You can take a screwdriver or pry bar, just pry out the panel while you're doing this. That's completely separated, and now we can move on to the bottom and the inside. There we go. And there it is. With that cut out, now we can do a test fit. With the door closed, we can line this line up right here and just check out how the fitment is. We do have to clean this up a little bit more, but if you line this up and you found that line wasn't in the right spot, that's a good indication why you don't always want to cut right up at the tippity top when you're doing this. You want to cut a little bit low. It's always good, about an inch. Will give you a little bit of play. And that's good right there. So this is cleaned up pretty well. There's still some rust on the bottom here. I'll just grind that down a little bit more. There's some foam right here. And it looks like some of the foam was retaining moisture and causing more rust here. So I'm going to pull that foam off. Before we prime this, we're just going to wipe this down. You can use a little bit of acetone. And you want to mask off any area you don't want any primer on. And just give it a coat of primer. Just go back and forth just like this. So it's looking pretty good. You keep test fitting it. You're going to test fit it many times before you actually attach it. And now we'll take the panel. It lines up perfect. Get that pushed in where you want it to go. And we're going to show you how to rivet this on. Just take a drill bit that's the correct size, match to the rivet. Take the rivet, get that started. Then with a rivet gun, just rivet that on. And do the same over here. There we go. Now you can do that all along the body, about every 1 inch, and then even in these locations on the side and on the bottom. That's the way you can do it without a welder. Glue it down and rivet it on. Now let's do it the final way and weld it on. Now we want to cut to line the panel up with the body of the vehicle. Before we cut all the way up there, we are going to grind this down. Now again, close the door, make sure this lines up good. Everything's lined up there. I'm just going to take a felt tip pen. Just make a mark. Now I'm going to cut below this line. It's easier to cut and then have to trim it back a little bit later rather than cutting too much and having to add some metal. And check your panel, see how it fits. We want to prep the panel. You want to grind about 1 inch from the top edge where you're going to weld, where we're going to weld right up to the body. And then on the sides, we're going to have to drill the holes for the spot welds. Now we're going to make the holes for the spot welds in the panel. Now you can use a drill and just drill these out, or if you have a tool like this, then it's going to make it a lot easier. You can punch them out nice and quick, but it's not impossible to do it with a drill. Now around all those hole punches, I just need to clean the metal up. I'm just gonna use the grinder. Now you should have sprayed this with some weldable primer. If you don't have weldable primer, you're gonna want to clean this up as well. Just use the grinder because you're gonna weld right to that. Now we're gonna do the final lining this up, making sure it's where we want it to go. Just gonna use some of these welding magnets. Get it set in place. So that line looks pretty good. Get that exactly where you want it. You may have to push up on this, put a couple tack welds around here, and then make your adjustments down below while it's just lightly tack welded in. I'm gonna start in the corner right here, and I'm just gonna tack weld because it keeps falling down right there. So I wanna get that adjusted right, get that all set, and then I can make other adjustments. So that's pretty good right there, and the panel's exactly where I want it to be. It's lined up with the door. Now I want to make my welds about every 2 inches and then just go back and forth. Otherwise the metal's gonna shrink and it's not gonna be lined up properly. All right, that looks pretty good. There's a couple areas that I have to fill in. There's a couple holes that burned through. No big deal. Now I'm gonna go around and fill in all the plug welds. Now I'm done welding. I'm just gonna grind this down, make it a little bit cleaner. Now I'm just gonna use a little acetone and a rag and wipe this down. Now I'm gonna mix up some fiberglass filler. Looks like it's all one color. Just really push it in. Now that it's cured up, I'm going to take a sanding block and sand it down. You want to do this before it turns completely rock hard. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely hard to sand this. You can still do it, but it's going to be a little bit easier if you do it after it's hard enough that it's not coming off. Now that's built up enough and sanded down, I'm going to add some regular body filler. This is not as strong as the fiberglass, and this is just going to cover up any of the holes and some of the scratches. And now we'll just take some less coarse sandpaper and sand this down. That looks great. Now if you had some more low spots, you want to add some more body filler, and you want to keep going to finer sandpaper. At this point we can wet sand it. We'll wet sand this area right here, and then we're going to do a quick little primer. When wet sanding, I like to use a sponge and just go around just like you're using regular sandpaper. You just got to get it wet. Then you want to wash this area off, make sure it's completely dry. I'm going to use some primer. We're going to prime it up. If there's any areas you don't want to get primer on, you want to mask those up with some masking tape. That was fun. With a little bit of patience and a little bit of sweat, even you can make it come out just like this. Now that's just in primer. We haven't painted it yet. You're going to want to get some color match paint, give this a wet sand after it dries, and then you can paint it, and it's going to look good as new. If you need panels for your vehicle, make sure you get those at 1aauto.com. And if you enjoyed the video and it helped you out, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Ring the bell, turn on all notifications so don't miss any of our videos. Now we're gonna here we go. We want to